Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Old and Mostly Forgotten. In today's episode, we will be reviewing a game that has been buried in the forgotten corners of the Steam store. Not even a large Steam sale can summon this Lovecraftian terror from out of its resting place. Once again, we are faced with a game that was responsible for the closure of the studio that created it. Also, it's a movie tie-in game. Yep, we're going to be talking about Tunnel Rats. This game. Now then, let's go to the store page and buy the game. So just go scroll down here, Tunnel Rats 1968, and wait. Produced by Bull AG, as an Uwe Bull, the boxing man, this guy?
And basically my message is, fuck yourself.
Alright, who let this happen? Who's responsible for this? Who told this man he could make video games? Quick, stop him before he makes a game based on a movie based on a game! Well, before we talk about the Tunnel Rats game, let's briefly discuss the movie, which I watched before playing through the game. Yep, this game is in fact a sequel to the Uwe Boll film of the same name, Tunnel Rats. A gritty war film directed by the man responsible for movies like Alone in the Dark and Rampage sounds like a terrible idea. That would be like asking Michael Bay to direct a historical drama based on— okay, I'm gonna quickly summarize the film, since you need to know what happens in the film to understand the game. In the movie, a squad of tunnel rats are flown out to Cu Chi, Vietnam, to investigate a tunnel that was discovered by C.O. Holliburn and his platoon. After arriving at Holliburn's camp, we are given brief introductions to the cast of characters, and also an awkward boxing match. Because Uwe Boll. After resting for the night, the soldiers are sent in to investigate the tunnel. One by one, they are killed off by enemy soldiers in various traps scattered throughout the tunnel. Harris, Porterson, and Green, who are the last remaining members of the original Tunnel Rats crew, become separated in the dark, seemingly never-ending corridors of the tunnel. As tensions begin to rise below the surface, Holliburn's camp is attacked by Viet Cong soldiers. Before it's completely overrun, Holliburn calls in an airstrike on the camp and then kills himself. Back below the surface, Green drowns in a water trap, and Harris gets into a standoff with a mother who is protecting her children. Porterson is able to escape the tunnel, but is killed in the airstrike called in by Holliburn. Whoops. As the airstrike bombs the surface, parts of the tunnel start to cave in, causing Harris and the mother to become trapped in the tunnel. They try to dig their way out, but after realizing the hopelessness of their situation, they give up and accept their fates, dying together as the credits roll. And that's the film. In all honesty, I went into this movie wanting to hate it. And well, I didn't hate it. Oh, don't get me wrong, it's a bad film, but not in a funny way. It's more disappointing, really, because the film does have some notable strengths that are buried underneath questionable decisions. The scenes inside the tunnel are, for the most part, well done. Because of the atmospheric sound design and close-up camera angles, the film is able to effectively immerse you into its dark, claustrophobic setting. It reminded me of the film The Descent. Well, obviously it's not as good as that film. Not even close. Also go watch The Descent. There are some genuinely tense moments in this film, such as a scene where Green has to hack up a dead body in order to squeeze past it. Maybe it's because of the fact that I can't stand the idea of being trapped in a tight space like this, but this scene genuinely got to me. But with every decent moment like this, there is always something terrible that immediately follows it. I mean, just look at this action scene, and tell me if you can actually make out what's going on here. I think Uwe Boll watched The Bourne Identity one too many times before making this film. The acting in this film ranges from tolerable to downright awful. So look at this scene right here. This soldier just witnessed an enemy get graphically hung from a tree. What emotion is this expression supposed to convey? It looks like he's trying to force himself to cry. And that's because he is. The dialogue isn't terrible in this film, but it often feels directionless and several scenes drag on because of this.
Listen. You like burgers, right?
Everybody likes burgers.
Right. Everybody likes burgers. Well, check it out. In California, this guy, he started up a franchise. That's the magic word, okay? Burgers, fries, shakes, speed, like that. You know what I mean? You just find a plot of land, he fronts the dough. It's easy as pie. You know, it's the American dream. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Which American dream?
In the making of Tunnel Rats, Bull mentioned that all of the actors were asked to improvise their lines, rather than memorize a script. Now it all makes sense. Genius Bull moment. So unfortunately, I can't really recommend the film. It's an interesting idea that I wish was executed better, perhaps by a more talented director. But don't worry, I can assure you that the game isn't nearly as bad as the movie. It's worse. Holy shit, it's so much worse. So Tunnel Rats was the third and final game to be developed by Replay Studios, a German game studio that made a total of 3 games before closing its doors a few months after the release of Tunnel Rats. Their previous works include Crash Day, a racing derby game that, from the little I saw of it, reminded me of games like Death Rally and Dirt Showdown. Their second, and most knowable game, is a World War II stealth game called Velvet Assassin. It's a game loosely, and I mean loosely, based on the escapades of British agent Violet Sabo, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who was renamed to Violet Summer in the game. I played through it earlier this year, and it's a weird mashup of games like Hitman and Splinter Cell that doesn't quite work, due to its shoddy gunplay, forced combat sections, and broken AI. I'll skip over this game for now, because it's a prime candidate for a future episode of this show. Tunnel Rats was published by Uwe Boll under the title Boll AG. I'm guessing the AG in the title stands for actual garbage. Thank you, I'll be here all day. So I tried looking for some interviews, news articles, and pre-release coverage to provide more background for the game. Guess what I was able to find? One interview, on a site that I have never heard of, with Uwe Boll. In this interview, Boll discusses the story of the game, and states that it takes place after the events of the movie. But the section that I really want to focus on in this interview is where he talks about the enemy AI and the game engine. The game uses the replay engine that brings the complete feature set of a next-gen engine. The AI was especially important to me, because shitty AI ruins every game. Well, I'm glad that we can agree on that. So why does the AI in your video game suck? That's why the AI in Tunnel Rats not only reacts to sounds, lights, impacts, and visual contact with a player, but also coordinates their attacking, pursuing, and covering operations. Along with answering the question of whether the game has multiplayer, spoiler alert, it doesn't, I double checked just to be sure, Boll also talks about how the game was developed relatively quickly. The biggest challenge was developing the game in such a short amount of time. The biggest reward is that Replay achieved a well-rounded game that is a lot of fun to play. Not sure about that last part, but I can say that the game definitely plays like something that was rushed out the door. The interview ends with Boll stating that he'd like to see how Tunnel Rats does first before deciding on whether or not he should make more games in the future. Well, if the quality of this game is anything to go by. Now, if you scroll through the Steam reviews for this game, you'll notice several users mentioning that the game does not run on newer operating systems. Which is true. The game will instantly crash the desktop if you don't install the community fix for it. And even if you do, there is still a chance that it won't work on some computers. This fix was provided by a user on the Steam forums, and the game ran perfectly for me after following their instructions. You did it!
Yeah,
Nice job. Come on, that right there is why they call you the best. Jigs all around. Now let's dig into this game, shall we? Ha 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 ha. Following the events of the film, we find ourselves in the role of Private Brooks, who is serving his first tour in Vietnam accompanied by a platoon. They are sent in to locate and rescue any surviving members of Holliburn's company. Before they reach their destination, however, their helicopter is shot down by Viet Cong soldiers. Brooks survives the crash and wakes up in a Viet Cong camp, where he discovers the bodies of his dead companions, including his sergeant, who has been tortured to death in a nearby building. Low on ammo and armed with an AK, Brooks must retrace his steps back to the crash site and check if the radio in the helicopter still works. Reaching the chopper, he is able to successfully contact Firebase Blackwood. After being informed that a chopper has been sent out to rescue him and another squad, Brooks must now find his way to the extraction point before the chopper leaves without him. This is his only chance of escaping the dangerous jungles of Vietnam. The premise of this game could easily work as a backdrop for a well-written, lone survivor-esque story focusing only on the main character, showing every step of his journey as he learns how to adapt and survive in this new, hostile environment that he's been thrown into. But unfortunately, the game fails to provide a believable, detailed setting to get immersed in.
Look! Look!
The atmosphere in this game is all over the place. The sections in the tunnel aren't bad. They manage to accurately replicate the atmosphere of the film, successfully maintaining that same claustrophobic feeling. It's easy to get lost in the maze-like structure of these tunnels, further adding to the desperate feeling that the game is trying to invoke. The sections that take place in the jungle, however, are complete garbage. During these parts, I never felt like I was actually navigating through a dense, cluttered forest or a wide open field. You know those large corn mazes that usually open up in the fall? Yeah, it feels more like you're navigating through one of those instead, due to the strict level design and hedges that funnel you through these sections. It also doesn't help that the graphics are pretty lackluster, especially for a game released in 2009. They must have blown all their budget on Velvet Assassin, because even that game looks better than this. The gun models have a cheap plastic look to them. Your hands consist of maybe 3 or 4 textures, and the environments range from decently detailed to appallingly low res, ruining any chance of getting immersed. See these screenshots on the store page? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that these are doctored images, because the foliage in the game doesn't look like that. In fact, there really isn't much foliage in the game at all. The textures in the environment frequently glitch out, and the lighting is... well, the lighting is definitely something, alright? Oh, don't worry, we'll talk more about this stuff later. Let's set the game's presentation aside for a moment and talk about one of my major issues with the game. The main character. Okay, well we gotta talk about Brooks, the main character. I'm just gonna say this right now. Brooks might genuinely be one of the worst protagonists I've ever had the misfortune of playing as in a game. And honestly, that's saying something. I mean, have you played Call of Juarez the Cartel or Only If?
Poor bastard.
I understand that he's supposed to be an unlikable character, and I would be fine with that if he was at the very least compelling. I can think of plenty of games, shows, and movies that I've enjoyed that feature protagonists that are either hard or impossible to root for. The problem with Brooks, however, is that there is no growth to him. He starts the game off as a vile, whiny, despicable man, whose hatred for the Viet Cong is only matched by his hatred of his father, and he ends the game with the same vicious mentality.
Gotta put yourself in their vicious little minds, man. What are those fucking...
They try to give him some depth by occasionally having him feel remorse over the enemies he's killed, or by having him question America's involvement in the conflict. With a better writer, you could definitely make a decent story that explores these topics. But in this game, these attempts at characterization fall completely flat, and for a couple of reasons. 1. Because shortly after every single one of these moments, he'll immediately go back to cursing the enemy out and using every possible slur you can think of. These jarring shifts in tone would be comical if they weren't so unpleasant to listen to. And 2, because the voice acting for Brooks is mesmerizingly awful.
Smoke grenade. Hallelujah. I might get out of here after all.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Instead of coming across as a soldier fearing for his life while slowly losing his sanity, he sounds more like an angry guy on Rainbow Six Siege who just learned how to swear.
You gotta be kidding. You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Without any proper character development, and lacking any, and I mean any, redeemable or compelling characteristics, it's hard to get involved in Brooks' struggle for survival.
What did she say in her last letter? Her teacher had said we were raping the Vietnamese nation. Her teacher! That's bullshit. No one I know has raped anyone. Why would anyone need to when whores are that cheap?
There is a very fine line between depicting someone who is loathsome but engaging, and just depicting someone who is not only loathsome, but also tedious to listen to. I grew tired of listening to Brooks repeat the same lines of dialogue over and over and over again. By the end of the game, I was ready to grab Brooks by the collar, throw him out into the street, and run him over with a semi-truck. I think the game had also gotten tired of Brooks, because his death is about as anticlimactic as you can get. I was genuinely relieved when the game ended with Brooks dying in an airstrike after failing to catch up with the rescue helicopter. I know that this ending was supposed to be realistic and upsetting, and it might have been more effective in a better game, but I was overjoyed when this happened. Good riddance, Brooks.
Yeah, I'm scared. I'm terrified. Yeah, I might be a pussy, Pops, but I ain't gonna get thrown out of the army.
Tunnel Rats is a painfully linear first-person shooter. Now let me make this clear. Linear is not a bad thing at all. Heck, most of my favorite games are linear experiences. A linear game can be engaging in many different ways, prioritizing open combat arenas that allow you to be creative with your weapons and gadgets, having plenty of exciting, action-packed set pieces that will make you want to keep pushing forward, or by focusing on immersing the player into a detailed world and story, with levels that reward exploration. Tunnel Rats doesn't fit into any of these categories. You'll spend half the game wandering through linear, maze-like hedges, avoiding traps and fighting enemies that will emerge from out of the bushes, and also out of thin air. You'll encounter 3 types of traps during these sections. Rugs, which can be pulled aside to reveal a pit of spikes or a small ammo cache, spear traps, which can be avoided by crouch walking, and grenade traps, which require you to press either the left or right mouse button when the marker is in the green zone to disable them. It's pretty easy to spot these traps, which makes them more of a chore to deal with rather than a danger to avoid. And I quickly got sick of doing the same QTE over, and over, and over, and over, and over, and over again. This isn't challenging or tense. It's boring. It's really boring. Staying true to the title of the game, several sections will require you to navigate the dangerous tunnel systems. These sections are initially quite tense, since you start with only a revolver and a knife. Your flashlight is an important tool during these sections, and you'll need to use it to locate the floor traps. However, enemies will converge on your position if they see your flashlight, forcing you to use it sparingly. That is, until you get an automatic weapon. You know how I praised the tunnel sections earlier? Well, here's the part where I take that gold star back. Once you get an automatic weapon, the tunnel sections lose all of their tension, becoming little more than tiny arenas to speed right through while occasionally slowing down to spam the use button on the ground when the hallway is suspiciously empty. How do you bungle the game's selling point this badly? What would have worked better, in my opinion, is if the first half of the game took place exclusively in the tunnels, with only a pistol and a knife. Then, have the remainder of the game take place on the surface, with your full arsenal. But I'm not a game designer, so what do I know? And that doesn't even get close to solving the game's numerous issues. You'll breathe a sigh of relief as the levels appear to open up later in the game. But this is a lie. You'll be constantly running into invisible walls, and it's very easy to be stopped by the terrain, making these sections rather awkward to play through. There are optional objectives to complete in each level. In these, you'll have to, for example, blow up a radio tower or destroy an anti-air gun. These are completely pointless. They don't have an impact on the mission in a branching narrative way, and they don't do anything from a gameplay standpoint. So why are they even in the game?
It's for the stats screen at the end of each level.
Doesn't this make you want to replay the game? No? It doesn't? You want to refund the game instead? Well, you can't, cause it's 3 hours long. The health system in this game is interesting. Instead of having regenerating health like most shooters at the time, you have a little bar on the right side of the screen. Medkits, of course, can be used from your inventory to heal up. And, now stay with me here, you can also increase the amount of bars on the side by picking up dog tags from dead allies and ears from dead enemies? Why? Well, you'd better get used to hearing Brooks say, "This is for killing my buddies, you commie bastard," over and over again, because that's the only line of dialogue he says when he picks up beer. Shut up! Well, enough about that. What about the weapons in this game? Are they actually satisfying to use? Are they at least better than the ones in Velvet Assassin, the other game by Replay Studios? To answer both of those questions in one word, no. The weapons in this game, with the exception of a couple, are pretty terrible, and all, including the weapons designed for ranged encounters, have an insane amount of drop-off. I mean, just take a look at how many hits it takes to kill this guy with an M16 at range. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Now, usually I'd do a detailed breakdown of every weapon in the game, but instead, I'm going to quickly compare each weapon by type. We'll start with the pistols. They both suck. You have the option of using an M1895 revolver or the instantly recognizable M1911. Honestly, these weapons are practically the same, with the only difference being their appearance. They both have a considerable amount of recoil when aiming down the sights and when fired from the hip, and they both only hold 7 shots. Headshots will sometimes not register, making them both completely unreliable. Since ammo for the Colt is rare, you'll be using the revolver for most of the game. For assault rifles, you have the iconic AK-47 and the classic M16. The AK-47 is bad. There's no other way to put it. When aiming down the sights, there's this blinding muzzle flash that makes it hard to see what you're shooting at, and the recoil kicks the gun down. Don't you mean it kicks the gun up? No, I mean it kicks the gun down. Look at this shit.
God forgive me.
The M16 isn't much better. It still has that same blinding muzzle flash, and it also has a smaller mag, without offering any added benefits in damage or fire rate. What makes it slightly better than the AK, however, is the fact that the recoil is easier to control, since the gun kicks up in a straight vertical line. But who cares about that, because the M16 and AK-47 are actually more accurate when you fire them from the hip. Did these guns come from opposite land? I got so sick of using these weapons that, at around the halfway point, I just ended up pulling out my knife to see if I could actually get any kills with it. And I did.
If I take a knife, I could just tidy it up a little bit. And now I got the taste of it in my mouth and I can't stop myself, so I go.
The M14 and SVT are your long-range weapons in this game. Let me make this one simple. One has a scope, the other doesn't. Also, I mean, just look at the sights on the M14. Towards the end of the game, you'll find the LMG and trench shotgun. The LMG is okay, I guess. But I'll be honest with you, I barely used it. Why? Well, you can't bring it into the tunnels. Also, the shotgun is better at crowd control than the LMG. With every other weapon in the game being subpar or awful, the shotgun stands out as being the only weapon that actually feels, without any asterisks, good to use. Good job, Replay. You made one good weapon. And then, finally, there's the grenade launcher. It doesn't work. I fired it once, it did the firing animation, and no grenade came out. When I tried to fire it again, it refused to work. Actually, on that same note, the grenades just don't work in this game. Like at all. Your character does the wind-up, and then never throws them. I tried reloading my save, restarting the game, and changing some settings. Nothing worked. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And that's not the only thing that doesn't work in this game. Tunnel Rats is a game that feels like it's being held together by shoestring. Surprisingly, the game never crashed, but it certainly felt like it was going to explode at any moment. Whenever you hit a checkpoint in this game, it freezes for 10, count them, 10 whole seconds. I was expecting it to crash at one of these checkpoints, but alas, it never did, even though the game was practically falling apart around me. You will witness the strangest things during the game's cutscenes, such as a helicopter materializing out of thin air, textures fading in and out of the background, and a guy missing half of his face.
Oh my god! What's wrong with your face?
The glitches aren't just limited to the game's cutscenes. Oh no. In my playthrough, I came across traps suspended in midair multiple times, floating grenades, broken lighting, missing textures, and bodies spawning in walls. You can even see the out-of-bounds area of the map if you jump up and down in certain spots. You can also clip your head through the roof of the tunnels if you're moving too fast. These are the type of glitches I would expect from an asset flip game on Steam, not a full-priced release. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. Buildings in the background are missing their walls and roofs. Grenade traps will occasionally still explode even if you hit the right button prompt. Even the AI has been affected by the glitchy world of the game. And in speaking of which, the AI in this game is pretty stupid. They almost never use cover, instead alternating between charging right at you and standing in the middle of the battlefield firing inaccurately. See, even they're having trouble with the weapons in this game. If you charge them with the knife, they will stop firing at you, probably because they don't want to be in the game anymore. And I don't blame them. There are a couple of parts in the game where, if you stand in a certain area, the AI will glitch in and out of the game world. It was during these moments that I began to question everything that had led me to this point in my life. Was it a mistake to play through this entire game in one sitting? Is this game even real? Do those soldiers exist? Do I exist? Why did I pay $20 for this game? I'll be completely honest with you. I almost didn't finish this game. I was ready to be done with this game at around the 1 hour mark. 2 hours later, when the game finally ended, I swiftly uninstalled it and threw it in the junk corner of my Steam library. 3 hours it was. It felt so much longer than that. Tunnel Rats and Velvet Assassin were both released in 2009, with Velvet Assassin releasing on April 30th and Tunnel Rats releasing on May 15th. Neither of these games performed well in any regard. Velvet Assassin was met with mixed to negative reviews, with only a few outlets scoring it anything higher than a 5 or a 6. And Tunnel Rats? Well, to say that the game was poorly received would be a bit of an understatement. Tunnel Rats was demolished by critics, with the game receiving a dismal 30 out of 100 on Metacritic. Even Colonial Marines didn't review as badly as this. And that game is arguably worse. While users were a bit more forgiving of Velvet Assassin's shortcomings, the same could not be said for Tunnel Rats, which also got pummeled by users. On Steam, it currently holds a mostly negative score of 30%, and on Metacritic, a 3.4 out of 10. Both games were commercial bombs. On August 3rd of the same year, Replay Studios closed its doors after filing for insolvency. The Xbox 360 version of Tunnel Rats was canned, as well as an upcoming project called Survivor. And that is all there is to say about Replay Studios. Farewell, we hardly knew you. Well, I think it's pretty obvious as to what my opinion on this game is, but in case it isn't, let me make it very, very clear. It's bad. Don't buy it. With frequent glitches, terrible gameplay, dreadful cutscenes, and a loathsome main character, Tunnel Rats is a miserable experience from start to finish. The game's few strengths are vastly outnumbered by its apocalyptic failures. It's too short for the asking price, but also way longer than it needs to be. The fact that this game still costs $20 is either an egregious oversight or a deliberate tactic by Steam to prevent more people from playing the game. It truly is a game worthy of Uwe Boll's stellar reputation. Stay far away from Tunnel Rats. And Uwe Boll.
Basically, my message is fuck yourself.
And that's all, folks. What a pile of garbage. It's one of those games where you feel kinda gross after playing it. I had to play through some good games like Painkiller immediately afterwards. Have you played Painkiller? That's a fun game, go buy it. Well, thanks again for watching. Now, what shall we cover next? Okay, no, we're not reviewing 2 shitty Vietnam War games in a row. Sure, why not? Wait, did anyone just hear a door open? Uwe Boll, how did you find this address?